51 years ago, on March 2nd, 1973, Anne Woodward was brutally murdered.
From a gritty childhood in Pittsburgh, Kansas, to the glittering but treacherous circles of New York high society, Anne Woodward's life was a cocktail of ambition, scandal, and heartache. Was she a desperate social climber who pulled the trigger on her own husband? Or a victim of circumstance trapped in a toxic marriage and menaced by a prowler? Even decades later, her story still sparks heated debates, especially when we consider that the beloved and controversial author Truman Capote was eager to expose every detail. Today, we're unraveling the dark story of Anne Woodward, Billy Woodward, and how one fateful night set off a chain of tragedies that shocked America's elite. Anne's childhood began in hard-scrabble Pittsburgh, Kansas, a dusty town plagued by economic downturns and diminishing job prospects. Raised in a family that struggled for every meal, Anne lost her brother early on and watched her mother bounce from one difficult marriage to another. The future looked bleak. Yet, even as a child, Anne exuded a steely determination. She confided to her mother that she dreamed of a glamorous life, one where she starred in movies and never knew the pang of hunger. For a while, her only refuge was the local movie theater, where she idolized the likes of Joan Crawford, imagining herself in Hollywood's glimmering world. When Anne was barely a teenager, her mother grew gravely ill with a rare strain of tuberculosis. She made a valiant attempt to find treatments, but the family's finances were stretched thin. In her final days, Anne's mother urged her to survive, no matter what it took. The day Anne left for New York with her mother's last few dollars stuffed in a small envelope, the stage was set for her to chase big city dreams. New York City in the early 1940s was a realm of possibilities for someone like Anne, now going by the more exotic-sounding Anne Eden. With platinum blonde hair, a new nose job, and an unbreakable will, she threw herself into modeling gigs and auditions for stage roles. She snagged a few print ads, but major success eluded her. Bills piled up, and she found a lifeline in a nightclub job at Fifi's, a place that catered to wealthy men seeking entertainment. Rumors circulated about what exactly went on behind closed doors. Some said she was just a dancer. Others implied much more. Anne herself always denied the darker insinuations, yet she was certainly on a first-name basis with powerful, deep-pocketed customers. One of these VIPs was William Woodward Sr., a married father of 5 and president of Hanover Bank. Despite a significant age gap, he and Anne embarked on a passionate affair. However, after a time, William Sr. began feeling guilty. He wanted out of the relationship without completely abandoning her. And that's how Billy Woodward, his shy, somewhat reclusive son, entered the picture. Convinced his son might be gay, or at least inexperienced with women, William Sr. suggested Anne teach Billy the ropes. In exchange, she would receive the financial security she craved. It was an arrangement that raised eyebrows, but it changed Anne's life forever. It's unclear whether Anne genuinely fell for Billy or simply followed William Sr.'s plan. Either way, the night she met Billy at Fifi's, she turned her charm up to full power. Billy was quickly enthralled. Within months, despite his mother's objections, Billy proposed. Everyone in his circle whispered that Anne was a scheming gold digger, but Billy seemed determined to make her his wife. The marriage opened the gates to a world of lavish galas, thoroughbred horses, and the kind of jet-set lifestyle Anne had always dreamed about. Yet acceptance by the old guard elites was elusive. Many scorned her working-class roots and rumored past. Some even believed she was still entangled with Billy's father. The more the upper crust froze her out, the more fiercely Anne strove to prove she was their equal. She took etiquette lessons, language classes, and tried to reshape herself into the perfect socialite. Anything to stop feeling like an outsider. Billy, on the other hand, yearned for the carefree showgirl he first met. He had no interest in a polished wife, trying to mirror the very society women he found stuffy. Soon, Billy unleashed a barrage of insults, branding her a phony and hooker in front of his own friends. As their fights became more public, they also turned violent. In the background of their glittering social events, Anne endured physical abuse, while also dishing out her own verbal attacks. Both drank heavily. Both were unfaithful. Friends whispered that it was only a matter of time before something dire happened. On October 29, 1955, the couple attended a party held in honor of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. On the drive there, Billy taunted Anne with the news that he had recently visited her hometown in Kansas to buy a plane. He'd dug up all sorts of unflattering gossip, like her father being alive and working as a streetcar conductor, despite Anne implying he was long gone. Allegedly, Billy even threatened to use this information against her if they divorced. Anne was furious and terrified that her carefully crafted image could come crashing down. They returned home late to Oyster Bay, where an intruder had been reported lurking around. Billy called the authorities that day, and indeed, a suspicious prowler had been spotted in the neighborhood. At bedtime, Billy gave Anne a shotgun for protection, then took another gun for himself, retiring to separate rooms. What happened next would become a sensational mystery. In the middle of the night, Anne fired her shotgun at a figure in the dark hallway. She claimed she heard a frightening noise, assumed it was the prowler, and pulled the trigger. When she turned on the light, she discovered Billy, shot and mortally wounded. Panicked, she raced downstairs, tossing extra shotgun shells into the gun cabinet, supposedly to prevent harming herself in her hysteria. Eventually, an incoherent Anne phoned the operator, sobbing that there had been a terrible accident. The police arrived to find her covered in Billy's blood, crying out, "I shot Billy! I thought he was the prowler!" The aftermath ignited a media frenzy. Many suspected Anne had killed Billy on purpose. Better to be a wealthy widow than a divorcee locked in a bitter custody battle. Billy's powerful mother, Anne Woodward, suspected foul play, but hated the thought of a scandal. When a parole violator, Paul Wirtz, was arrested for prowling in the area and actually confessed to being on the Woodward property that night, Anne's mistaken identity story seemed less far-fetched. Still, the gossip persisted. Meanwhile, a grand jury convened to decide whether to indict Anne for murder. She gave a compelling testimony, breaking down in tears, describing her fears of an intruder and the state of her marriage. In a move many saw as suspicious, she relinquished custody of her sons to Anne Woodward. This effectively banished Anne from both her children's lives and New York society. The grand jury ruled not to press charges, but whispers of her guilt never stopped. The tabloids loved it. A volatile marriage? A sudden shotgun blast? Was it truly self-defense or a cunning plan? Enter Truman Capote, the flamboyant writer celebrated for his clever wit and scandalous storytelling. Intrigued by high society drama, he latched onto Anne's case, feeding on every rumor about her quest for status and the possibility that she'd coldly executed her husband. Years earlier, at a Swiss cafe, the two had crossed paths in a now legendary confrontation. Anne allegedly called him a derogatory slur. He fired back, dubbing her Mrs. Bang Bang. Their mutual disdain only intensified. Capote was busy cultivating friendships with the wealthy, who he referred to as his swans. While they believed he was just an eccentric confidant, he was secretly gathering their secrets for a planned novel called Answered Prayers. He intended to expose all the dark corners of high society, and Anne Woodward's story was pure gold. After years of delays, during which he became famous for In Cold Blood, Capote finally returned to his sensational project. By 1975, Anne had spent 2 decades trying to rebuild her life. She traveled, attempted new romances, and tried to stay under the radar. Yet rumors about her husband's death still overshadowed her. The final blow came when Capote teased that he would soon publish a chapter featuring a fictional stand-in for Anne, a ruthless Midwestern showgirl who offed her rich husband the moment he threatened divorce. Friends warned Anne that Capote was about to expose every humiliating detail of her past. The actual text of Answered Prayers had the character Anne Hopkins shoot her husband without remorse. It painted her as a cunning social climber who manipulated wealthy men. Feeling cornered, the real Anne saw no escape. In late October 1975, she dressed in her favorite gown, put on her most glamorous makeup, and swallowed a lethal dose of sleeping pills. When Elsie Woodward heard the news, she reportedly remarked, "That's that. She offed my son, and Truman Capote just destroyed her." If Anne's end was tragic, the fates of her children were even worse. Her younger son, James, battled mental health issues and heavy drug use, eventually ending his own life a year after his mother's passing. The elder son, William Jr., also sank into despair. A glimmer of success in the horse breeding business wasn't enough to overshadow the trauma of losing both parents under terrible circumstances. In 1999, William Jr. took his own life as well, plunging the entire saga into even deeper darkness. As for Truman Capote, his decision to turn the private lives of his wealthy friends into lurid prose backfired spectacularly. The Swans ostracized him, cutting off the gossip supply that once nourished his literary ambition. His social downfall, compounded by addiction, isolated him from nearly everyone he once charmed. The man who had thrown the party of the century died in semi-seclusion, haunted by the knowledge that his final big masterpiece destroyed friendships and, possibly, Anne Woodward herself. The story of Anne Woodward and Truman Capote collides where ruthless ambition meets desperate survival. Anne craved a way out of her impoverished roots, believing that marrying into the upper crust would deliver lasting happiness. Truman seized any salacious detail he could for creative inspiration, disregarding the human toll in his thirst for a groundbreaking novel. In the end, both lost themselves. Anne tried to escape the shadows of her tragic marriage, only to be driven to a final act of despair. Truman, once lionized for his genius, ended up alienated and tormented, culminating in his own struggles with addiction and ill health. So, was Anne truly guilty? Did she really believe Billy was an intruder? Or was it a moment of rage fueled by fear and revenge? Although the courts exonerated her, the rumors never ceased. And as for Truman Capote, he sought to paint a vivid picture of high society's darkest secrets, but doing so cost him every ounce of the acceptance he once treasured. Let us know your thoughts on whether Anne Woodward was a cunning killer, a misunderstood survivor, or a bit of both. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's hidden truths. Until next time, stay curious. If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK.